high-speed bullet trains, the ability to keep time on your wrist, camera phones, and even the LED light illuminating your screen right now were all innovations that emerged from Japan's technologically advanced society and economy. Our last video showed Japan in a state of emergency after the US dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, leading to Japan's unconditional surrender to the US. So how did Japan go from this to this? Actually, how did anyone recover from the devastation of World War II? After 6 years of fighting, the Axis powers, including Japan, surrendered to the Allies in 1945. World War II caused unprecedented death and destruction, with at least 80 million deaths and billions of dollars in damages. Today we'll examine the aftermath of the war and focus on post-war politics that helped the world recover and enter the modern era. Our goal is to answer the following guiding questions. What were the major challenges faced by European countries in the aftermath of World War II? Why were the international war crime trials held after World War II significant? How were Japan's political and economic structures altered after World War II? We'll also look at this big picture question. How did the aftermath of World War II lead to significant changes in global politics and social structures? At the end of the war, cities such as Paris, Rome, and Brussels were lucky to be largely untouched by damage. London, Warsaw, and Berlin, on the other hand, endured major destruction. As a result, many civilians were displaced after their homes were destroyed, while others could choose to remain in their damaged homes. Those who were able to stay faced challenges like having no access to basic necessities like water, electricity, and food. Some, such as concentration camp survivors, were displaced in foreign countries. Because working men and women had left their jobs to serve as soldiers and work in military manufacturing during the war, agriculture and the production of consumer goods were disrupted. After the fighting ended, food production and poor transportation due to bombed-out roads and railways led to starvation and disease, resulting in thousands of additional deaths. Some countries, like the Netherlands, Denmark, and Norway, had an easier time resuming their pre-war governments because they experienced less damage to their infrastructure and fewer political disruptions during the war. Other countries, such as Germany, Italy, and France, had no interest in returning to their old leadership, especially since they had to recover from oppressive leaders like Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini. In the aftermath of World War II, newly formed governments and governments in need of reform faced a critical question. Which is better for a state's economy and its people? Capitalism or communism? The raising of this question would escalate into a global conflict that would last for the next 50 years. Post-war Europe saw an increased interest in communism as a pushback against fascism. For example, in the aftermath of World War II, Romania transitioned to communism, establishing the Romanian People's Republic. Communist countries faced challenges and setbacks, such as economic stagnation and restricted freedoms. On the other hand, France and Italy, fearing communism, elected anti-communist governments and were able to recover rapidly. Pause here to answer our guiding question. What were the major challenges faced by European countries in the aftermath of World War II? In addition to the political and economic struggles facing Europe after the war, people had to figure out ways to find justice for the horrible atrocities that had occurred during the war. In the 2 years following the war, representatives from 23 nations tried Nazi war criminals in the Nuremberg trials, which took place in Nuremberg, Germany. The trials were conducted to bring the perpetrators of the Holocaust and other war crimes to justice. 22 Nazi leaders were charged with committing crimes against humanity, which included the murder of 11 million people. Considering what you have learned about the atrocities committed in World War II on all sides, how would you define what qualifies as a crime against humanity? Who do you think gets to determine who is prosecuted for their crimes? Crimes against humanity refer to widespread and systematic acts of violence or persecution committed against a civilian population. After World War II, trials for crimes committed by the Axis powers were prosecuted. However, no one from the Allied powers faced trial. While Adolf Hitler had died by suicide before the trials, the remaining high-ranking Nazi leaders faced charges. For example, Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, was found guilty and received a death sentence, but he later died by suicide before his execution. 10 other Nazi leaders were hanged, and their bodies were burned in the same ovens that concentration camp victims in Dachau had been burned in. In addition to the Nuremberg trials, there was a separate hearing known as the Doctors' Trial, which took place in U.S. military courts following the war. 23 Nazi defendants faced accusations of war crimes, including human experimentation and mass murder disguised as euthanasia, the practice of intentionally ending a life to relieve suffering. Almost all defendants were medical doctors who had sworn to protect and heal their patients. This trial brought to light the crimes committed by the Nazis in the name of medical research. These trials contributed to the development of the Nuremberg Code, which is a set of ethical guidelines that established moral principles for human experimentation and became the basis for many international laws governing medical research. The war trials served as turning points in international law and human rights. They sent a message that individuals who commit crimes against humanity will be held accountable for their actions, regardless of their rank or status. Let's pause here to reflect on the following guiding question. Why were the international war crime trials held after World War II significant? After World War II, Japan was left with a shattered economy, obliterated cities, and millions of casualties. Following Japan's unconditional surrender, the U.S. occupied Japan to promote stability and reconstruction. As a global military power and the perpetrators of dropping the atomic bombs on Japan, the U.S. sought to rebuild Japan while limiting its power to ever wage war again. General Douglas MacArthur was appointed to lead this effort, focusing on rebuilding the country while avoiding resentment that could fuel future conflicts. Japan was demilitarized by the U.S., and the government democratized, transforming the country from an empire into a constitutional monarchy. The rewriting of Japan's constitution was a key part of this process, which dramatically reduced the emperor's power and limited the country's ability to wage war. The new constitution granted all citizens, including women older than 20, the right to vote. It also created a new two-house parliament called the Dietto, with a prime minister chosen by the majority of the parliament to lead it. MacArthur also tried 25 people for war crimes, including Premier Hideki Tojo, the prime minister of Japan during most of World War II. Tojo was found guilty and executed. However, the trials after the war did not address crimes committed by the Japanese military troop Unit 731, which conducted experiments on prisoners of war and civilians, including biological and chemical warfare. These were only brought to light decades later. Some believe that World War II war crimes have not been fully addressed and atoned for, which continues to affect political relations between countries today. Despite challenges, Japan's economy transformed rapidly, leading to a strong capitalist system and global trade integration. This change was driven by Japanese citizens who were empowered by democratic reforms, the privatization of the economy, and U.S. support during the occupation. Here you can see U.S. Secretary of State Dean Acheson signing the 1951 peace treaty alongside 47 other nations, officially ending the war. This treaty, coupled with the US occupation's focus on Japan's economic transformation and democratic reforms, fostered a strong alliance between the two nations. Pause the video here to answer our last guiding question. How were Japan's political and economic structures altered after World War II? World War II was transformative and brought us into the political world we know today. New alliances formed, like the one between the US and Japan. Meanwhile, the world was about to face a new type of war between the US and the Soviet Union, as the nuclear arms race and ideological conflicts between capitalism and communism intensified. This marked the beginning of the age of global superpowers and the Cold War. While we still have a few more lessons to go in world history, new content ends here with the birth of this new and modern age. But be sure to stay on the lookout, because history is everywhere.
Hey, hey.